This is the Cliff Yates Show. Personal growth, motivation, inspiration, and philosophies for a great life.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Cliff Yates Show. You are in the right place, and as always, I have a special guest, and this guy is really special. He's a kindred spirit in so many ways. Also a retired sergeant from the LA County Sheriff's Department and continuing to serve in supporting first responders, and we're going to get into all that, and he's really doing amazing things, and he's going to talk about after his retirement in 2018, he realized there was more suicide deaths than in the line of duty deaths. And I was surprised to hear that myself. And he knows all of these statistics, and he has a lot of resources to help first responders, whether it's firefighters, police officers, dispatchers, and all that. But let's get him right on the show because we got a lot to talk about. Hey, Danny Kuhn, thanks for joining me, my brother.
Hey, thank you, Cliff. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I'm going to enjoy this experience, and I hope your readers or your listeners gain something from what we have to talk about today.
Yeah, and when we get to it, I'm going to point them to your bulletprooffirsтрesponders.com. You're going to have those links, and there's a lot of resources in there for first responders. Copline, Blue Help, which I was surprised to hear about, Share the Load, Mighty Oaks, and we can talk Copline, all those things. And boy, I really thank you for your service, continuing service. And that's something I feel in my heart also, that I just want to continue to serve. When I was kind of floundering, what should I be doing now as retired? And I think continuing to serve is something that we all feel that we should. And we were talking before about that police work really is a God-ordained profession. So I'll let you go into how you got into all this after your retirement.
Certainly. And I retired in March of 2013 and moved to northern San Diego County, which is right next to a Marine Corps base called Camp Pendleton, so any Marine knows where that is. And for the first 5 years of retirement, it was great. My wife and I, we have a motorhome, and we'd go traveling and do all kinds of fun things. And then in 2018, I came across some personal tragedies. My dad passed away, which hurt a lot. My sister-in-law passed away. She was a retired sheriff station clerk from Los Angeles County Sheriff. And at the same time, my wife was diagnosed with lung cancer, stage 3 lung cancer. And all of that hit real hard. And I'm combining that with, over the first 5 years, of meeting several veterans and separated Marines who always talked about suffering from PTSD, and I'm thinking, you guys are crazy. Like, you're just, you're weak. You're nothing. You're making that stuff up, and that's the thought process of most people when they first start talking about post-traumatic stress. And then in the time around April, May of 2018, I learned that every year more police officers die in the line of duty. More police officers died by suicide than in the line of duty. In fact, today, suicide is the number one cause of death in law enforcement officers. This year alone, 46 law enforcement officers have committed or have died by suicide. And in the line of duty deaths, it's at 65. However, there's only been 13. The best way we kill ourselves is car accidents. And this year, there's only been 13 traffic accidents. Unfortunately, 23 people have died by gunfire, being assaulted with weapons and stuff, and that's just the hatred on the police right now. And I foresee those changing as the pendulum swings. And the pendulum because you went through the Rodney King riots and all the fun stuff too. Yeah. And then in that 65, 6 other law enforcement officers have died by different types of assault, by either vehicular assault, knives, or something else. And the secret is that there's only been 5 this year documented law enforcement officers who died by heart issues or heart attacks. And actually, I see that number should be higher when you extrapolate out the incident that happened. You get in a fight at 8 o'clock in the evening, and you extrapolate that high pressure from 8 o'clock in the evening to another 24 hours, and you have a heart attack when you're off duty. You could probably put that and tie that into the incident that happened when you were working. So those are the basic things. And in 2018, after I found out all that, I decided, there's something that needs to be done. I learned a little bit more about post-traumatic stress. And I learned it was real, especially after 2018, because all the emotions that I had bottled up and stuffed down and compartmentalized over 31 years just started coming out. And it got to a point, and I go, there's got to be something done. And then I decided, if I'm going to do something, if I'm going to enter into this arena, at the time wasn't very populated, I decided I'm going to make it faith-based.
Yes.
And
yes.
in doing so, then I came across an organization called Mighty Oaks, and I became very good friends with Jeremy Stolnecker, who is a co-founder of the Mighty Oaks Foundation, and he has helped me a lot and just given me a lot of motivation to keep pushing this on and reaching out to the first responder community. And I included first responders in there because at the same time I found out that in the fire community, more firefighters every year die by suicide than they do in the line of duty. And slightly above heart attacks, suicide is still the number one cause of death among firefighters. Now, heart attacks are a close second, with cancer being a very close third. So firefighters get the triple whammy of cancer, heart, and suicidal ideation. So I started writing on that and expounding on post-traumatic stress, on the stress that we put up with. And, you go to work every day and you don't think about anything you're going to see is going to bother you, but then you go to that multiple homicide scene, or you go to the baby not breathing call where it's a deceased baby, or you go to these just some outrageous crashes that you have. In Los Angeles County for a long time, you didn't see really bad crashes on the surface streets. You always seen them on the freeways. And, probably in the last 10 years of our careers, that's when the knucklehead racers started racing on surface streets, and we saw some horrendous crashes. And I know up in the Hollywood area and the LAPD side and on the sheriff's side, it's just insane with the way those people are driving up there and just acting stupid and doing stupid things. Down in San Diego County, I learned a long time ago, when you're driving down the freeway, it's not uncommon for someone to be in the number one lane closest to the fence on the freeway. Yep. And to cut across 3 lanes and get right onto the off-ramp. And there's just really, when you see those horrendous crashes, I saw a crash in Palmdale one time where 3 babies and their mother was killed, and that upset me for a while, just seeing that. And I know the Air 5 guys that the air rescue pilots and paramedics that came to extract these kids from the car, they all had a hard time dealing with it. And it's just something you don't naturally see, and you end up stuffing that down inside you, and you just keep it there, and very seldom do you ever let it go. And then eventually you're going to have some psychological things happen to your amygdala and your hippocampus and hypothalamus, and it's just weird things that happen up in your brain.
Let me ask you, Danny, because you've sparked something in my head, and I just wonder if maybe your experience, you can help me a little bit. Does it matter the age? Because now, before I came to the LA Sheriff's Department, I worked in upstate New York in this area as a deputy from age 21 by myself until 26 when I went to LA County. But some of those horrendous, and maybe because it was unnatural to see, those horrendous fatal accidents that I saw on these back roads, they had a bigger impact on me than some of the things I saw in LA. Is it maybe because of age, or because of these traffic accidents when we're there in midnight and we're seeing something that's unnatural with the car and the broken glass and the smells of the gasoline and alcohol? Is it more impactful when we're younger, or is it just because? I wonder why that seems to impact me more than some of the later things that I saw.
Well, I think it's a combination of several things, but what you see at like, I'm 66 right now. What I see,
me too.
66, if it was horrendous, then it would still stick with me. But I know how to deal with it better now. One of the things that I like to talk about is volume.
Volume.
In law enforcement, most police departments, about 50% have less than 50 officers. And we're talking, you have some of these counties where there's might be one deputy and one state police officer for an entire county on a graveyard shift. So there's some long rolls and there's some long.
Yeah,
and you
Danny, we
don't
had
get the
we had 22 road deputies where I worked, and then there was one state police car for the whole county, and sometimes it would be 30 minutes for me to get, and our sheriff he felt like, well, one call, one deputy. He didn't even like to have two deputies show up at a call.
Yeah, and then you come to the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department where you're working a 2 square mile area with 14 radio calls.
Yeah, and you call for help, and 25 cars come, right? I mean, the dichotomy from where I came from, it was just almost I couldn't even fathom it.
Yeah, so when you get the volume of a larger law enforcement agency, obviously you're stuffing more stuff down. But
Yeah.
it's no different. When you're in a smaller agency, or you're, like you said, one call, one car. When you get into those things, first of all, at 21 years, I was in the Army at 21 years old. But
Yeah.
when I came on the department at 24, I would see some things that, okay, I've got experience in this before for what I saw in the Army, what I saw as a law enforcement explorer, but it still sticks with you, and you kind of just got to deal with it. But it's mostly, I think, the volume of things. A small department doesn't get the volume of things they do, but they still get the horrendous things.
Yeah, you do.
We don't see, Highway Patrol does, but a street cop, a city cop, does not see, an 18-wheeler doing 65 mile an hour going
That's
head
right.
on
I know
to a motorhome coming the opposite way.
I saw that so many times. People falling asleep at 80 miles an hour. Yeah, just crazy.
Yeah,
Hey, and Danny, what about? I mean, maybe that's why, because let's say this happened, I would see this in upstate New York, and so, like you said, the volume is so small. Now those thoughts sit with you for a long time because you have nothing but open road. Nothing for 4 or 5 hours. We're in the LA Sheriff's Department. We're kind of on to the next thing, right? So the volume is more, but maybe it's a distraction, right?
Yeah, the volume is a distraction. It's kind of weird because, like, one of the areas I worked was the Palos Verdes. I worked at Lomita Station.
Yeah.
And Lomita is a unique area, kind of like Hollywood. And where at one point, you can be walking into a ghetto house, and in the county area of San Pedro, which is just straight out of like South Central LA.
Yeah.
And I know they have those areas in West Hollywood. And then you can be walking into a multi-million-dollar mansion, on the outskirts of Beverly Hills, or for me was the Palos Verdes Peninsula. And,
right.
The stuff you see in both, and I remember my first family disturbance call. It was in the city of Palos Verdes, the States. And I worked the graveyard shift. This was about 2:30 in the morning, and my training officer was Rocco, and we get this call of a family disturbance. And all the training we've always done in family disturbances. When I was in the Army, I was an MP. The family disturbance we saw there. So you kind of had your mindset on what's going to happen. So we get to this family disturbance, and we walk in, and the husband's sitting in one chair. And he's very peaceful and calm. And the wife is sitting in another chair on the other side of the room, all peaceful and calm. And they're having a conversation like we are. And it's like, where's the family fight going on?
Yeah.
What's going on? And it was kind of bizarre. But then you get down into a different area, a different socioeconomic path, and bottles are being thrown in places.
I know it.
Flying around. So it's just crazy.
What? And we must have come on at the same time. I don't remember. We never worked together, right?
No, not that I know of.
I came on in
Our paths, I'm
83,
sure,
221. When did you go on?
I was in class 210 and
210. Wow.
November of 81. I went to CJ, so I got sentenced to jail for 9 months before I got out to Lomita. And what was happening in 82 and 83 is the sheriff was pushing people out of the jails quickly to get patrol ready for the Olympics, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah, the 85. I was in the jail then. I had to do 3 years. But you're lucky you got pushed out because I hated it in the jail. But I learned probably some of my biggest lessons in communication skills in there. But yeah, and so you went right to Lomita. And where else did you work?
So I worked for Lomita for 2.5 years. I really didn't like working that station. And I transferred to East Los Angeles. Which,
you worked East LA. Oh, my God. Okay.
Yeah. East LA, gotten 2 officer-involved shootings there. Both of them where the suspect died.
Yeah.
Left there, went to the Antelope Valley Station, way up in northern Los Angeles County. And the Antelope Valley is about 2.5 times larger land-wise than the city of Los Angeles. They have 2 contract cities, Lancaster
Yeah.
and Palmdale, and they have about 14 different unincorporated communities and a whole vast desert area. And in the late 80s, I was there in the late 80s and the 90s, methamphetamine was getting
Yes.
real big, and up in the desert area of San Bernardino County, Los Angeles County, and Kern County, there were major meth labs and just tweakers all over the place.
Yeah.
And I worked Lancaster and Palmdale, and the entire area, for just under or right around 7 years. And that place there was kind of unique because it was growing so fastly. New deputies were always transferring. A transfer list would come out, and there would be anywhere from 5 to 10 new deputies coming in.
Yeah.
So the rock stars of today were put out to pasture the next transfer list because
Yeah.
the rock stars were coming in. So that kind of really put a hold on getting a good DB position or a detective position or a good job someplace else. And you're kind of regulated to pushing a radio car. And it's not, pushing a radio car is not a bad thing. It just gets old after a while. You need a break.
That's right. Yeah.
And there came an opening for a detective on Catalina Island. And Catalina Island, for your listeners, is, of course, the song says 26 miles across the sea. It's 22 miles from the port of Los Angeles across the Pacific Ocean. It's a small island, about 22 miles long, 23 miles long, 8 miles wide at its widest point. It has one unincorporated community with a permanent population of around 100.
Yeah.
And it's a huge boating destination. And then you have the city of Avalon, which is a contract city. And they claim their population is somewhere between 35 and 4,000. And that's where I worked, was on the island. And we had a patrol area of the San Pedro Channel.
Who is your sergeant out there? Who is your sergeant?
We had 3 of them. Gary Olson was one of our lieutenants. Patrick Saul was one of our lieutenants. Sergeant-wise, Roger Zombek, you may know him.
I know Roger. Well, Gary Olson was my lieutenant at CJ. What a great man he is. Oh, my God.
Yeah, Gary, he went over the island before I did, and he promoted to lieutenant and stayed, and then left and went to CJ and retired out of there. So it was,
because he had a house in Las Vegas, so he would drive back and forth for 300 miles. But what a good man. Always supported me and always supported the deputies, and was just a real common sense leader. Man, Gary. And maybe a lot of that because you're really kind of on your own out there in Catalina Island. There's no help coming very quickly.
It is. It's you. You got to be quick on your feet, and you don't. On the mainland, you do a search warrant, you get a whole gang of people. On the island, you get a search warrant. There's maybe 3 of you.
Yeah.
But I left Catalina after a little over 8.5 years. And
8.5 years on Catalina, dude. That's a long time to be dealing with that summer crowds and just dealing kind of like a one-man show on that town. And God bless you, man. I mean, I bet your communication skills increased immensely just being amongst those people.
Yeah, you do. You kind of stick fear in your back pocket and you just do it.
Yeah, that's right.
The thing is I think at the time we had 13 assigned, 9 deputies and 3 sergeants, 1 lieutenant. And one deputy was permanently assigned to the Isthmus or 2 Harbors, which is where that small community was.
Yeah, that's way on one end, right? Or no?
That's like on the west end, yes, sir.
I don't know if people know there's bison out there, right? You have like bison?
Yes.
Yeah.
They bison were brought over in the 1920s for a movie. And they were left there, and it became a tourist attraction. Now the island used to be maintained by Los Angeles County Parks and Recreation,
right? And
then the Catalina Conservancy started and took over maintenance of the island. So Parks and Recs has a very, very, very small footprint, like about maybe a couple hundred feet. But the Conservancy took over, and after they saw a lot of the damage being done, and they wanted to control the bison population, so they started taking the bison off, and I feel sorry for these poor bison. They were taken off the island. They were put on a barge. So then they spent about 18 hours of bobbing back and forth on this barge going across the channel. Then they were trucked to, I believe, like South Dakota or North Dakota, to a ranch where they could live out their natural life. so
That's
they wouldn't
great.
be taken out for. But they took these buffalo off an island where the average, the ambient temperature is usually around 70, 72 degrees,
Yeah.
and they stick them to a place where 6 months out of the year you're not going to see the
Below
ground.
zero. Yeah.
So
All right.
I
I'm
thought,
sorry. You left Catalina, and then where did you go? I'm interrupting you because I love these
yeah,
stories.
after Catalina, I went to Compton, became a lead detective, where I ran the robbery assault team for a minute,
Okay. What
and
what
I
year
ran
was
that
that?
one.
What year was that?
Oh, 2006. They would go to
Wow.
2010,
Okay.
and I ran the robbery assault team and the special investigations team, and both of those I was a mentor. Matter of fact, one of the kids that I made fun of, because I used to say, some of you, I've been on the department longer than some of you guys have been alive.
Been alive. That's right.
One of those kids goes, "Sir, I was a baby when you came on the department." He's getting ready to be promoted to commander. So I did a good job mentoring him.
Well, I was at Linwood before Compton was even a station, so 87
Yeah.
to 91. And it's just weird to me. So my first trainee was Eric Para, and who's now the chief
know
of
Eric.
police in Huntington Beach. Can you believe he's the chief
Yep.
of police? Oh my God. And so what a great man. And his dad was Gil Para was a great detective and a great man also. Those guys were great Christian warriors. And so, yeah, so we worked those same areas, man. Man, what a great dichotomy there from Catalina Island all the way over into Compton, where just people cannot fathom. Talk about volume. Is it crazy or what?
There were times, and you can relate to this at
Yeah.
being a busy station. There were times where we'd go in service, and every call you rolled to was a code 3 lights, red lights, and siren response, because that
No,
was it.
yeah.
Every call was an emergency call. It was just as soon as you cleared one call, man, you're picking up the microphone, taking the handle on another call, and it was just crazy. And there were several nights that because we had to, as a detective at Compton, we had to work patrol two
Yeah.
times a month. Plus, there was a gang of overtime, and that made it nice. And so, but you're just busting your butt the whole time
Yeah.
you're working.
It's so inconceivable, Danny, that when I went to patrol school from the jail, I forgot, I can't remember his name, but so that, they send two people from the station to go to patrol school and kind of monitor you or get you prepared. And so when these guys were saying, well, some nights they're so busy, there are shootings that you won't even be able to go to. And I'm thinking, that's got to be bullshit. And then, wow, it wasn't. Right.
No, it's true.
Yeah. So that's great.
Yeah, like just it's insane. A friend of mine, he's a captain with the Oceanside Police Department.
Oh, my God.
Great guy. He's a Christian man. He spent 20 years in the Marine Corps, and was stationed at Camp Pendleton. And while he was in the Marine Corps, he retired as a master sergeant, I believe. But the last several years he was in the Marine Corps, he was a reserve for Oceanside Police Department. And he remembers one time on one of they have down here, they used to have, they don't anymore, but what they called the 4th of July riots is
Yeah.
they would light the fireworks off out of the harbor,
Right.
and the beaches would just get conglomerated with people, and they'd have stupid people going around drinking, acting like fools, smoking dope, and just doing
Yeah.
stupid things. And he was a reserve, and he was called into this area, and I believe he had to pick up a couple of prisoners to take him back to the jail. So he gets his car filled of a couple of guys to take back to the jail. Well, all the regulars abandoned him, and he's now sitting there with this whole group of rowdy, drunk beachgoers just trying to free their comrades. Well, he finally gets out of it and gets back. And his story goes, several months after that, he was deployed to Iraq in the first wave. And
Wow.
he was telling the story. He goes, I was more scared in Huntington Beach than I was in Iraq.
I believe it. I can imagine.
And,
Wow.
And it's kind of a weird concept because it is scary.
Yeah.
You just don't realize it that in the jail, everybody there is a criminal because
Yeah.
of the jail. On the streets, when you're going through a gang area, you don't know everybody's. The guy that comes up to you nice and sweet
With a
he's
smile.
a gangster. He's gonna be smiling
yeah.
at you and then putting a cap in the back of your head.
Yeah.
Or you remember these as is you'd be driving through these gangster areas, and the kids could come out yelling out to you, hi police," waving their hands. And what they're really doing is they're notifying their drug
Yeah.
dealing gangster brothers, who the kids don't know any different.
No. Jeez.
They're just being polite, but in reality they're being used as a decoy for the drug dealers.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
it's just that craziness that happens in the inner cities and stuff.
It's funny, when I think back on as opposed to the propaganda that's been going on for the last few years, just the fact that, and I was always, enlightened by this, that so many people, although popular, they couldn't do it in the front yard, but in the backyards, these people would just thank us for being there. They actually loved that we were there. And those people that, they portray that we're infiltrating force, but boy, there was people that were so thankful that we were there. Do you remember those times?
Working in Compton, we were loved.
Yeah.
Everybody loved us. I mean, the gangsters hate us, but the gangsters only represent between 5 and 7% of the population of the city. East LA was the same thing. The gangsters, a very small population of the 100 and some odd thousand people that live there. But the best food I ever ate was it was in the inner city, in the ghetto or in the barrio, because you would be invited to these bars. You just show up.
That's right.
On a call for service because the neighbors were complaining about the mariachi music being too loud.
Yeah.
And you'd get there and go, the music's not too loud. And then next thing you know, you're getting all kinds of food given to you. And that's how it was in the hood too. You'd go to a call for service and you'd get there and go, well, nothing's going on here that's illegal or immoral. So, and then all of a sudden you're getting a slab of ribs thrown in your face. It's like, oh, I'm going to stay here for a while.
Yeah.
We can handle this call a little bit longer.
Yeah. Yeah, we were loved, man. It's just amazing. Yeah. Gosh, it was, it was some really, you really kind of felt, as much as, like you said, the volume was overwhelming. It really did feel like you were making a big difference when you were active.
Yeah, and I don't see that too much different in the smaller communities where
Right.
I think the officers get the same love, maybe even get more love there, or it's more evident that they're getting love there because it's social media obviously shares, the small town cop going into a donut shop and someone buying a donut, or going into Chick-fil-A and someone else buying their meals for them. It does happen, and I think it's more prevalent in the smaller jurisdictions and the larger jurisdictions, but it's a lot of times because we didn't have time to go to Chick-fil-A or, you're hitting the drive-through at McDonald's and that's about it. That's all you had time for.
We could go on with these stories for about 5 hours. And I'm thinking about Steve Perry from Journey. I ran into him at the Good Neighbor in Lancashire when I was working at Universal, and also Larry Elder. And we would go down for breakfast down at this Good Neighbor restaurant, and all the time you would go to pay, and then, Larry Elder already paid for your breakfast, or Steve Perry already paid for your breakfast, and those guys were always there. Just, man, just unbelievable, man. And Larry Elder, what a great, this poor guy was so attacked, right, as the black racist. But anyways, I don't want to get detracted into that. I want to go to, you were inspired to write this blog after you came across these things. Let's see if I can bring up your latest blog. And this is just the beginning of it. And I want to send people to your bulletproof firstresponders.com because they can read your blog. And I was just inspired just by the beginning of this. I'm going to read a little bit of this. Being the guardians and warriors of our society, firefighters, medics, cops, and emergency response dispatchers, I like you include everybody, are all too familiar with the horrors they face every day, right? Daily. They experience and see things that most people cannot comprehend. First responders tend to overlook themselves when providing a much-needed service to the public. On any given day, they will be involved in horrible situations where death and loss are sudden and unexpected. These daily events can cause stress that can very easily and quickly take a toll on their mental health. It's crucial to prioritize mental well-being in such demanding roles. And it goes on and on. But man, Danny, I want people to go read your blog because it's also going to provide services for anybody who maybe is just kind of reflecting and having a bad time. And there's a place where they can go or someone will talk to them, right?
Yes. There's several organizations out there. First Help, and 2015, Karen Solomon started a organization called Blue Help with the
Blue Help. Yeah.
she had others help was working with her after her husband had died by suicide,
Oh man.
and she started this organization and actually became very relevant in 2016, and she's been collecting data of reported suicides since about 2016. And her organization, they came out a report. I will send you a link,
Please.
to you so you can put on this to this report that that she did in conjunction with a professional organization, and it breaks down things like over a certain period of time, how many police officers were white that killed themselves, how many police officers were um, were dealing with what types of problems. So it's very interesting. Well, she started this organization because law enforcement suicide in general, isn't widely reported. Okay, and crime in general isn't honestly reported, and I think you can attest to that.
Yeah.
I was thinking this morning, on the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, we have statistical codes. Every department has some type of code to
Right.
delineate what type of crime it is. And so for the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, a stat code or clearance code for us for a domestic violence, a felony domestic violence, would be a 050.
0. Yeah. I remember
then-
that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy that I remember that. And then for a misdemeanor domestic violence would be a 146. So you would go to the scene, you would talk to the victim, and you would see signs of, yeah, this is a felony domestic violence. And you'd go back to the station and you'd turn your report in, and they would have on the top of the report a 050. And then you'd get your watch sergeant who's getting heat from above saying, we have too many felony domestic violence in our jurisdiction, or in this reporting district, or in the county in general. And
Right.
they would say, hey, do you think you can change this to a 146 and misdemeanor?
I remember that. Yes, they would do
And-
that.
And reluctantly you would change. And then the next day you would be working some spot where you didn't want to work,
Yeah.
but you would reluctantly change the stat code because you were ordered to. And, deep inside, that's morally wrong, but that's
Right.
just some of the things that organizational stress that you have to put up with. I mean, once you get, being out on the streets was great, but once you get into the supervisor area where you got to be around all these sergeants and lieutenants, all you did is just get a bunch of crap thrown at you all the time because they want you to do what's right for the city or for the county or the jurisdiction. So just by skewing that 050 to a 146 takes it out of a part 1 crime and puts it into a part 2 crime.
Right.
And
Yeah.
we've had the same things with armed robberies. I think an armed robbery was a 02 series.
Yes, that's
And
right.
If you change that to an aggravated robbery, would take it out of a part 1 crime. So obviously your stats are going lower. Right now they're bastardizing the homicide stat, changing it from a murder. They're changing it to unknown or unknown cause, even though just to show that the murder rate is not going up like they
Wow.
think it is. It's that, and there's a gentleman named Colonel Dave Grossman. I'm sure you've heard of him.
I know Dave
He's a
Grossman.
retired-
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that guy is great.
Great. Oh my
he-
God.
He does a blog on, or a podcast, and
I didn't
he's
know that.
actually right in. He guests on a lot of podcasts. So
Okay.
eventually, what he says is, in the last probably 20 years, the homicide rate should actually be double or maybe triple than what it is.
Yeah.
But because of medical technology, because cops and firefighters were all carrying tourniquets now, and a lot of people in the general public were carrying tourniquets, that person we saved yesterday with his leg gushing out from getting a gunshot wound in his artery there, we're saving his life by putting a tourniquet on him. They get into the hospital. He's going to lose his leg, but he's still alive. So that now goes down. It doesn't count as a would-be homicide. It goes to an ag assault. And so those are some of the ways that they're changing the things around too. But that's a legitimate statistic there. Saves by the hospital is what he calls them, I believe. But great. If you ever get a chance to listen to any of
I got to.
his
Yeah.
podcasts, there's a couple of guys out of I'll send you a link to them out of Virginia.
Hey,
Bad bad to the Bones
bad to the
podcast.
bad to the badges.
Bad to the Bones.
Oh, bad to the bones. Okay, I'm gonna check that
Bone
out.
to the Badges. There we go. Bone to the
Oh,
Badges.
bone to the
podcast.
badges. I like that. Oh my God, that's great. Yeah, you spark another thought in my head about the mental. It's going to go to the mental side of suicide and police officers because you remember in the ghetto areas. So, a police officer, and this was documented many times over the years that a police officer might get a non-fatal wound, but because in his head, seeing TV, when you get shot, you die. Sometimes people would die of a non-fatal wound where these gang members were so used to seeing people survive in a gang fight and shooting that their mental state would allow them to survive, where a police officer would die because of his mental state, right, and what he believed was happening.
Yeah, that's true. You see it all the time. These gang members, they're warriors of the street.
Just gunshots everywhere, and they survive. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't fear most of them. It's like the Somalis in Somalia, and Black Hawk Down, they're all high on cotton. Well, out here, they're, in the ghetto or in the hood, weed is like coffee to you and I.
Yeah.
And they're all high and they don't think of anything of it. And
No.
go out and shoot up. They're for some reason or another, they've lost their moral base. And they have no fear. And if they get shot, it's, oh, well, I don't care if I'm going to die or not. Where you and I, we get shot, it goes, oh, man,
I'm going to die.
and I'm going to die. I'm going to die. And the next thing you know, you just psych yourself up where you got to have that warrior base.
Yes.
Where you get shot. You take a guy named Robert Rangel, and I think you may know him.
We're good friends. Robert Rangel, West Hollywood. Yeah.
Yeah. He wrote the book, the Red Dot Club.
The Red Dot Club. Yep.
And after he got shot, he tried everything he could to go after the guy that shot him.
Yeah.
A lot of it was he couldn't because he had physical injuries, but he
That's
had
right.
that warrior mindset. That,
in his mind, he could still chase down this guy.
I'm getting this guy.
Yeah.
And in about 1988, it's the fall of 1988, I was on Whittier Boulevard. We were at a scene of an assault, and I was hit by a Ford F-150 pickup truck doing 25 miles an hour.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And I flew about 22 and a half feet to the ground.
Oh, my God.
Landed on the ground. I do not being hit by the truck, and I do not remember landing. But I do remember that when I became conscious again, I was so pissed off I wanted to go kill the driver. But I could not physically get up. Two reasons was because my hip, I couldn't walk, and I had 4 firemen holding me down.
Wow.
They knew I was mad.
Yeah, but mentally you thought I'm going, and then all of a sudden you realize my leg's not moving. So did you fully recover from those injuries?
Oh, yes, I did. That's the amazing
God
part.
bless you,
Although
man.
I got to admit that 2 weeks ago I had knee replacement. I was hit on my left hip, and I had knee replacement surgery about 2 weeks ago on my left knee.
How's it going? How do you feel?
I feel great. My knee, it works in pretty good. 1 to 2 on the pain level. I have a high tolerance to pain, but 1 to 2 on that. I'm not taking any meds.
God bless you, man. God bless you.
Everything's going good so far.
Well, I tell you, I'm interrupting you, but I've had so many people that I've known that got these knee replacements, and they're doing great. They're playing golf, and it's been a really good thing.
Yeah. So for me, everything's been going great. And when I got hit, I'd been a Christian. I became a Christian when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And a lot of times,
let's talk about that. Yeah.
You don't realize the veracity. You don't realize what you really just did. And in my teenage years, going to church and learning about Christianity. But your teenage, do you fully understand?
No.
And then going into the military, you fully understand. Still going to church on and off. And but you're a Christian. You may not be living the Christian life. You're doing stupid things and walking away. Basically, you're not walking away from the church or from Christ. You're just living a different life, and it's not in balance with the Christian lifestyle. Well, when I got hit by the truck, when I first saw the truck, my attention was driven away from this truck coming at me. So when I was first saw the truck, my hands were up because I was directing, telling them to stop, stop, stop. I looked away and then I looked back up again, and something told me this is not my own conscious thought, because my own conscious thought is I'm going to get run over, and I'm going to go and I'm going to get run, and the truck's going to go over and kill me. But something told me, go move to your right. I moved to my right, and at the same time, something told me push down as hard as you can on the hood. And when I pushed down on the hood, it changed my balance. So now the truck, instead of hitting me lower in the legs, or instead of hitting me in a way where I would go under it, I put myself in a position where I would be launched. And that's what I did. I got launched. So basically, that saved my life. And you wonder, why did that happen?
Right.
Or another time in East LA, where I had a trainee, and we're leaving a scene of it was a loud music call, and we go up and we talk to the people, and we're leaving the scene, and we're walking back to our car, and all of a sudden you hear the pow 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 pow, and you hear bullets going over your head, but right before I heard that, I changed the direction I was traveling or walking slightly, just off by 5 or 10 degrees, to the radio car, where I would go to the back door and then walk up to the front door instead of just walking up to the front door. And for some reason I changed. We had angels watching out for us.
We do. Yeah.
We are being watched after all the time, and at that part, it was not my time to go. And God says, you're gonna stay alive, and you're gonna go through this. And the riots we were getting shot at. The first day of the riots, we're down in the city of Los Angeles at MLK and I want to say Normandy.
Yeah.
At this shopping center that was on fire, and we're there gaffling up people and taking them to jail, and through the smoke, all of a sudden you hear that distinctive sound of AK-47 rounds going off.
Yeah, if you hear it, you live through it. Yeah,
and you're watching windshields on radio cars and spotlights getting blown out.
Wow.
And what do? We go running
towards it. Yeah.
And nobody got hurt. No bad guys. None of the people we gaffled up for looting got injured. No cops got a couple of radio cars had, busted out windshields and spotlights. But other than that, we were being watched over and we were being protected.
Yeah, I want to let's relate that too. I want to ask you some questions about maybe people who have started leaning on their faith when they've maybe been in a suicidal state of mind and saved them, and your experience with that. And I want to say, too, I was brought up, for myself, I was not brought up in the church, which I find it was probably a good thing because I was able to start afresh. But as a police officer in upstate New York, and even though I had a lot of negative, that can't be I always knew, and I guess this is implanted by God in your heart and soul, that you're implanted that there's a God. So I always knew there was a God. For some reason, I would never deny that. And like you, I've had all these things in upstate New York. I had a guy who was waiting outside the restaurant to shoot me, and he fell asleep. And I stayed in there long enough for him to fall asleep. Find out later in jail, he tells the sheriff that he was going to shoot me with a shotgun. I almost stopped for a guy who was hitchhiking, and I was going too fast, and so I kept on going. That guy had one bullet left in his gun. He had just killed the lady, and then I thought, why did I survive these things? And then it was no one ever. I don't know what you would call it, ministered to me, but when I was in the jail in LA County, a deputy by the name of Bob Weinrich, he brought me to Christ and had me accept Jesus Christ. No one had ever even told me about Jesus Christ before. I knew about God I just had never gone to church. So, and then, although in the last few years I've been so into the Word and meditating on the Word, Danny, sometimes I reflect and say, wow, but why did I wait so long? And then I've decided, we are always in time. God is not in time. So we can't beat ourselves up and say, why didn't, God is not in time. There is no time for God. And for us, we think, oh, well, I waited so long to be and accept Christ. Listen, that is just our mindset, right? That God is out of time. So, but have you had experience with people that maybe either they went back to Christ or their faith, which helped them get through these suicidal thoughts, or that you brought them there?
In the last 5 years, I know of one guy who he had lost his parents, retired, got an ugly divorce. Just a lot of bad crap had happened to him over the last several years of his career.
Yeah.
And we were in the same academy class. He reached out to me one day after reading one of my blogs, and we talked for about an hour and a half. And I later learned that that conversation brought him out of him harming
Wow.
himself, and that and it's just that one. When you get that
Right.
one, that really counts. And I haven't heard from others. I have heard people um, text me or will write a reply or send me an email saying, "Hey, thank you for what you did. You're helping me out with. Thank you for your comments on this particular subject. You really helped me out getting through a bad time." And those things, they really help. And
They do.
when I get phone calls and messages from current and retired people from the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department asking me who to contact. They have a friend or they are feeling this way,
Yeah.
and they ask me who do I contact, to who can I talk to, and so I can give them information on people to talk to. One guy just reached out to me, a retired sergeant I worked for. He reached out and says, well, his friend son isn't a cop. He's former military. And so there are former, bases on the former military side, because we both run hand in hand
Right.
on it. So, and then, when I was working back in the 80s, they had what was called Cops for Christ. And
Yes.
for some reason, Cops for Christ had a small area in the briefing room where they could have their materials. Now, you don't see that stuff in any police station anymore,
No.
but they had that there. And I first noticed it at East LA.
Yeah.
And there were a few
Yeah.
deputies there that publicly proclaimed a life of Christ. Now,
Yep.
there were probably several of us that didn't and weren't actually living the same lifestyle that we should
Right.
be living.
Yeah.
And I would sit down and talk to these guys every once in a while and just kind of reassure what's going on. And then after I transferred up to the Antelope Valley, Lancaster, Palmdale area, I met my wife there, and we got married and became members of a church up there. And up there was probably about 25% of the people, the deputies, proclaimed a relationship with Jesus, and were living that lifestyle.
Yeah.
And that was kind of cool. Then transfers, you go to different areas. After I retired, and after I started doing these posts, guys are making remarks on my blogs, where I'm seeing things that they're posting on Facebook and who they're following, and they're following guys like Jack Hibbs from Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, or they're following Pastor Greg Laurie from Harvest in Riverside, or they're following different pastors, or they're watching different things on YouTube and TV from around the country. And I'm going, you are one of the most heathen pagan guys I knew when I worked with you, and
Yeah.
you're proclaiming Christ. Now that is awesome. And either they were saved already then and just living the crappy lifestyle that we were all living back then, or they came to Christ afterwards or somewhere near the end of their career.
I probably would have been one of those. You said that, right?
But it's kind of cool to see that these guys are they're coming out, and they're now doing the same thing. They're saying, hey, that Facebook post of yours, you shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
But to people that post some pretty nasty things on Facebook, and these guys, wow, that wasn't very Christ-like that you to post that, and they're right. Because what people post sometimes is not very godlike. So that's kind of cool.
I struggle with that. God, I love Jack Hibbs, man. That guy, he is like, because he brings the Bible to what's happening today. In other words, he says, when everybody thinks the world is falling apart, we know through the Bible it's all coming together, right? I mean, I just love the guy. You saw Mike Johnson had him give the prayer, and he was attacked, right, for saying, our Father who art in heaven. And what a warrior for, because, people want to, you read that fairy tale book, or, you follow those stories. It's a living word that's happening today, right, Danny?
That's right. It's I forgot how many authors already is, but this is a book that was written over a time period of like 3,000 years.
Yeah.
By 100 and some odd different authors.
Right.
And when you read the gospel according to Luke,
correct,
compared to the gospel according to John, you read those two gospels, they were written at two totally different times by only
Exactly.
one guy that was there.
Yeah.
Luke was written. Luke was not a disciple. Luke was his story is
No.
coming down through Peter and through the Apostle Paul. So it, these are how these stories, and it's just amazing that you're reading some of the in the Old Testament. I'm not going to call them stories. The chronicles,
The
the
Chronicles.
facts,
And,
and
yeah,
some of
and
these things.
yeah, and Luke says, as a doctor, he says, listen, I have looked at these things in an investigative eye. I have gone over these in detail. This is what I've come to know is true, right? He says that in his
Right.
writings.
And it's just, you get was it Isaiah quoting or making a quote in the Bible about the coming of the Messiah, and then 1,000 years later, Jesus is sitting there saying,
Correct.
per Isaiah 14, whatever, I am who I am. I am the Messiah, as Isaiah would say or has said. It's like they didn't have Bibles back then. They didn't have written scripture available like now that you can memorize it all. So
Well,
it's
what's
just
so exciting, Danny, is that these people, like you said, and you have to know in context, right? People will quote Isaiah, and then you got to realize this is 800, 1,000 years before Christ even comes. So all these prophets said this is going to happen, and then it came to happen. How can you not be a believer? And on one of your recent comments on your LinkedIn platform, it was a gal who's a chaplain. She quoted Isaiah 41:10, right? Fear not, I'm with you. Be not dismayed. And it goes on to be, have courage, right?
right. Yeah, I wrote a blog on courage. Yeah,
Yeah, I just
It's,
think it's so, and maybe, I don't know, do you, is that kind of, do you go through a faithful-based support of people who are like suicidal or?
I haven't directly done any suicide intervention or anything. I am more of an
Providing
educator.
resources, right? But, and Danny, that's, as much, sometimes when I start reading, and I've been in the Word so much, it's like, I start to think, well, I'm in no position to be able to say this, so I'm going to, but really, the fact that we should discuss it because other people then, we can actually bring people to the Word, right? We can point them in that direction, let them do their own research, but we can also be a conduit for that. So I think you're doing that. You're bringing people to resources if they're in a bad state. It's natural to be in that state considering what we've seen, and this is what you can do to help, right?
Right. What our problem is in the first responder community is education.
Yes. Yeah.
It's something. I mean, we went through the academy 2 years apart at the same time. Probably had one or two of our DIs may have been the same.
I bet we did. Yeah.
And what was taught then hasn't changed too much to what being taught now in the world of mental health. It just was not talked about. We did not
No.
talk about suicidal ideation in the academy. If someone from psychological services came in to talk to us about in the academy, they would come in and say, hey, if you're stressed out, come and see us. If you're going through a divorce and need family counseling, come and see us. If you need counseling in general, come and see us. They didn't say anything about, hey, if you're really having a hard time and thinking about eating your gun, come and see us. They never said anything like that.
No.
Suicide just was never talked about. And in my class, we had 4 deputies or 2 officers and 2 deputies die by suicide.
Really?
One of them in the locker room at Linwood Station.
Oh yeah.
Right after he got off training.
Yeah, he was having trouble with the girlfriend. I got there a couple of years later. His locker was just down from mine. I think there was a bullet hole in it or whatever. And he had just seen something. Right, he saw a fatal accident, I think, on the railroad tracks or something that day or the day before.
Yeah, there was some other circumstances going on,
Yeah.
but that was. And then there's Olivia Johnson. She's a suicidologist. She studies suicide. She's a former cop, former Air Force or an Air Force veteran, and she has penned the Fatal 10. So, on top of just the normal stress that we carry every day, there are other factors going into why people commit suicide or die by suicide.
Yeah.
And so that was interesting. But yeah, another guy in my class who we worked together. We were friends in the academy. He had a he retired medically and then ended up some things just overwhelmed him and he died by suicide. So it's very sad. And that was something we never talk about. And what I always say is we need to start the conversation. If we can just start having conversations like you and I are having now,
Yes.
just sitting down and talking to people about, hey, you're feeling bad, then that's at least getting the first step out there.
Right.
And or around, it was about 1987 when I was working at East LA. I was I primarily worked graveyard shift. I loved early mornings.
Me too. I
And
loved him, man. I
I
loved him.
yeah, I loved earlys. And then in the middle of 87 or so, I went to a PM shift overlap car to be a training officer.
Yeah.
And on one of the times, I was first on PM shift for like a shift, or not a shift, like a month or two of shifts, just to get acclimated to the activity on PMs. And I was working with different partners because these guys, at a larger station, the guys on the other shift, but you never worked with them.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
was working with different guys. One day after shift, a guy I had known, I mean, we weren't friends. We knew each other from the different shifts. That was about it. And we kind of joked around each other, but never did anything off duty or even had dinner on duty. And he comes up to me and goes, "Hey, can we talk?" We go out and we sit in his car. And for an hour, we just sat there in his car for an hour. And he just laid out all kinds of things were going on. His kids were giving him problems. His wife, he was having marital problems. He's having issues with some of the sergeants at work. And all you do, I just sat there and listened to him.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that hour was over with. It was about an hour and 15 minutes. We talked, and he felt better. I felt that this was a worthwhile hour to
Yeah.
listen to him. And that's that conversation that we need to have with people, is to open up and say, can we help you out? Or are you feeling okay? Are you having issues? Everything at home going okay? That those things just aren't happening. And once you start that conversation, then we can branch out into the other things. Because we all know, anybody from the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department knows about what happened on November 6th of 2023. And that's where
Yes.
4 deputies or 3 deputies and 1 custody assistant, which I consider correction officers the same as law enforcement, where they died by suicide in a 24-hour period. And since then, and I wish I had a button on my computer where I could play a sound effect of a cricket, because since then, that's basically what you've heard of that is crickets. Not the department has done very little to reach out to people. And the main cause of some of those 4 were causal factors was lack of sleep or sleep deprivation. And that's a very interesting thing where you get into sleep deprivation. You go 24 hours without any sleep, you're the equivalent of a person who has a 0.10 blood alcohol.
Drunk. And the amount you can't metabolize fat during that, when we go lack of sleep causes a dump of cortisol, a stress hormone in your body, and people don't. I'm just learning about the importance of getting sleep and mental health and physical health together. You're so right. I want to talk about that time because, man, our hearts broke. My wife worked Sheriff's Headquarters Bureau. She introduced me to this young man, this great positive thinking man who was just a high achiever and very moralistic. I assume he was probably a Christian. And then I went to the Deputy Leadership Institute, and I went through that, and then I became a facilitator, and then I went to the Supervisors Leadership Institute, and then we got together, me and him got together, and we were in this part of the same group, and I thought, wow, this guy is such a family man. And that was Darren Harris, who ended up killing himself in his garage, not knowing that his father did the same thing. And I just, one person I would have told you that's never going to happen to, that really shook me, and it shook my wife too. Did you know him?
I'm sure we crossed paths.
I think he was a commander, right? Was he a commander?
He was a commander who was off
IOD
injury and was just getting ready to come back to work.
Yeah.
And who knows what? With 30 years on the department too, and it's just.
Yeah, I'll tell you,
very
what a good-hearted. I don't think they would have been any more moralistic. He was someone that I aspired to be. As far as character-wise, he really set a great example. I mean, really positive all the time, and tried to conduct himself in a positive, moralistic way. And so I would have never thought that. I forgot I had a train of thought there, but man, that shook me and my wife a lot when that happened.
One of the things that we do as cops, whether you're medically retired or you're off on an extended IOD, Okay, me and you are radio partners. We've been working together for 4 or 5 years, and all of a sudden, you go off on an extended injury. So you're off work for 6 or 8 or 9 months, and all of a sudden, that family that you had, that law enforcement family, isn't there anymore because
Yeah.
even though you and I worked together for 6 or 8 years or 5 or 6 years, I'm not calling you. We don't have that day-to-day conversation.
Yeah.
I might be calling you once a month saying, "Hey, dude, how you doing?" You don't have the other people that you hung around with or talked to at work all the time. Then you start to lose a little bit of that identity. And when you're on a medical retirement in general, but medical retirement is even worse because on a medical retirement, one day you're there, the next day you're gone. Oh, we don't know when he's coming back, and next thing you know, your desk is already occupied by someone else. You ain't coming back,
You know.
and you're retired. There's no hoopla. There's no congratulations. There's no giving you your medal of whatever, your material
Yeah.
service medal. There's none of that. You're just, you get a knock on the door and someone gives you your retirement credentials,
Yeah.
and that's a medical retirement. That's sad, and people have a hard time with that.
Yeah, they do.
And
I'm telling you, it is. And retirement in general is, to be quite vulnerable with you, Danny. And I guess it's a pride thing, but sometimes, this is not, put myself in a positive light, but as a sergeant on the sheriff's department, I used to walk in the room, and people, "Hey, sir, how?" I mean, you know what I mean? I felt really, I don't know, I kind of missed that. Now I walk into a room and people look at you like, "Oh, who's this piece of shit?" I used to walk into a room and people would say, "Hey, here's the sergeant. He's here." Do you ever deal with thoughts like that? I mean,
yeah, I must say, "Hey, Sarge."
Yeah, and Danny, I got to tell you, and this should tell people who want to aspire to be leaders, and you should be leaders, that I wanted to be a sergeant for all the wrong reasons. At the time, if you made sergeant, you would be making a top step sergeant $1,000 extra a month. So I thought in retirement, if I retire 70%, that's an extra $700. But I don't want to be a damn sergeant because that's going to be the most terrible job there is. And then I got into it, and it was one of the most fulfilling things to be able to have a positive impact on the people that served you. Was it the same for you?
It was the same thing. Being a training officer, you have the positive impact on your trainees, which during the career of a training officer, especially on a larger department, you may only have 4 or 5, maybe 6 trainees.
Yeah, that's right.
Being a team leader or team leader on a detective team, you have 5 or 6 detectives working for you or working with you, and you're mentoring them, and so you're really not getting that. You're getting, again, 4 or 5 people over your career as a detective that you're mentoring. I think I mentored maybe 8 detectives in a 12-year period.
Yeah.
Now going into a sergeant, oh, what an awesome job that was. Now I got a shift. I got 12, 13 people and I worked park bureaus when I promoted. So I had security officers, 18-year-old kids that wanted to be deputy sheriffs, like a good thing. I had those guys all the way up to, deputy sheriffs who had 28, 29 years left on the job. And the only reason they were doing it is for the overtime. And so you got to mentor all of those.
Oh, yeah.
And that was really fun.
Hey, did you work with Mike LaPerouse over there?
No, but I know who he is.
Yeah.
But Parks was a lot of fun.
Yeah, Mike passed away. Yeah.
Oh, sad. They're very sad. It's was he retired more than 5 years?
No, he went to Tennessee and then he had died of a cancer, and he was a great guy. Yeah, he was at Universal as the senior deputy. I don't know if he went from there to Parks or he came. No, I think he did. Yeah.
Probably went to Parks as soon as they opened.
He went to help, because he was really a big time leader up at Universal. He kind of ran the whole place, and it was kind of sad. I used to love to work the Country Music Awards there, and then one day I was going down there to watch the rehearsals, and these 2 dudes were walking down the back road behind the substation. One guy, he's got a big black hat, and a long trench coat, and the other guy, he was a big, good-looking young man, and these guys, "Hey, can you show us where the amphitheater is?" And I go, "I'll walk you guys down there." That turned out to be Montgomery Gentry, and I ended up getting to see them later that night because Mike LaPeroux used to host he used to have security for a private party after the Country Music Awards. And if you know Gentry, he died suddenly in a helicopter crash. But crazy, yeah.
That's right. You get into law enforcement. Why do people become cops? Why did you become a cop? Why did I become? For most of us, it's a calling.
It's a calling,
For
right?
some reason, when we were, knee high to a caterpillar, we were embedded in our minds, you're going to be a cop. Well, that's something that, whether you believe in God or not, is embedded into your head.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you're what religion you are. It doesn't matter anything. That is just something that God embedded into you then.
Yes.
Now, granted, there are people who got into law enforcement for other reasons.
Right.
During the 80s, during that huge hiring push by LAPD, the Sheriff's Department, Highway Patrol, a lot of people got in because also the economy was down. Interest rates were, I think, 12% then.
They were, yeah.
And interest rates were way high. The economy was down. There weren't any jobs. People were getting into it because it was a paying job, and it was a job they were going to go get into for a couple of years before the economy got better. But for the most part, probably 95% of the people that get into law enforcement, they get into it because it was a calling, or it is a calling, and that's why we do it.
Is that why? Why do you say it's a God-ordained profession?
Well, it's several different reasons, but we can go to Romans 13, 1 through 4, and I think the Apostle Paul says it best. And when you have to remember, when the Apostle Paul wrote this, it was it was in the time period Caesar Nero was in charge of Rome, or he was the Roman Empire leader. And Caesar Nero was one of the ruthless, brutal people who maintained that position.
Right.
In fact, Paul was in prison knowing that at any day Caesar Nero was going to have him beheaded.
Right.
And he wrote this epistle to the Romans, the Roman church. And basically it says, basically not what it says, and this is out of the New Living Translation, is everyone must submit to governing authorities. For
Right.
all authority comes from God, and those in positions of authority have been placed there by God. So not only, he's talking about authority in general. And then
Right.
you go back. Now, this is after the death of Christ. You go back when Jesus was at the temple and they asked him, who do you pay taxes to? To Rome. And Jesus looked at the coin, says, whose face is on the coin? And says, pay taxes to Caesar.
Give Caesar to what is Caesar's. Yeah.
Yeah. It goes on in verse 2 is, so anyone who rebels against authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and they shall be and will be punished. And that is so.
Yes.
Because, you see, God put us in position. It's the same thing with the military. When we're going out and we're doing the Lord's work, we're put there in a position, and it's not pretty.
Right.
We're been called to do a dirty job.
That's right.
As you could put it. I mean, cops are not pacifists, and we were not put there to be pacifists.
No.
Jesus was not a pacifist. Look at what he did at the temple. I mean, and a lot of people say, "Oh, the Bible is peace and love and blah blah." There is no pacifist in the Bible. You're fighting all the time. You're being persecuted. You're fighting for what you're doing in the Word of God. And doing police work, when we go up against evil, I mean, David as a shepherd boy went against the evil giant David, and he was able to do this he was ordained by God to do that. He was put there by God to take care of a certain thing. And that's what we are doing as in law enforcement. God had put us there by he put us in that position because he decided that it was his calling.
Yeah, and I think that's
those are the words I was looking for.
Yeah, and we need to, as citizens today, because when David was visiting, he was actually visiting the front lines, right? His dad sent him there with food and whatnot, and to check on his brothers who were fighting, and then he saw, Goliath talking shit across the way and challenging God's army. And he was like, is this not a cause to fight?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
he was just astounded. And he says, I'll do it. You know what I mean? And so I think that, and like you said, it's not, if people, these people are watching these stories on Netflix because they like murder and everything else. If you want to read about murder and cheating and lying and you think those are great, read the Bible because everything is in there. And David, who is the apple of God's eye, he was a warrior. As a matter of fact, God couldn't have him build the temple, right? Because, hey, your hands are too bloody. I'm going to have
Right.
Solomon do it. And man, I just think, and you know what I take heart, and I'm glad you brought this up because sometimes I wonder, because I feel a spirit of upbeatness in me, and sometimes it doesn't go with what's going on, Danny. But then I'm reading Philippians 4, right? And many times Paul is writing from jail. He's in chains, and he's writing, "Rejoice in the Lord always." And I'll repeat it: "Rejoice in the Lord always." So when I go out, some of these people may be Democrats or liberals or whatever, but you know what? I give them a smile, and I try to put rejoicing out into the world. Do you do the same thing?
I try to
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
try to keep a positive attitude. I wake up in a good mood every day,
Yeah.
and everybody asks me how's things going. I go, so far so good. And it's
We're not, and I'm not
and
divorcing
it's only
myself
get
from
better.
reality either. And Paul wasn't either. He knew he was in jail, but yet he
that in a
knew.
given moment he was going to get his head chopped off.
Yeah. Someone today, I was just listening. Hey, we know how the book ends. We end in victory. However, there's going to be battles along the way. And I'm learning so much, right? What's the saying in the Bible, right? No weapon formed against me shall prosper. It doesn't mean there won't be weapons formed against you. They will be formed against you, right?
Oh yeah, every day.
Every day. Well, I want to bring us to an end here. Will you come back on the show? Because there's a lot more I want to talk to you about. We have a lot more in common on the department. But, and I want to, once again, we're going to have all of those resources available. And I'm telling you, on the bottom of, especially on Copline, if they go to copline.org, it has all of those resources. Blue Help, Share the Load, and the Mighty Oaks resources are all there. And I think they're all there on your website also.
Yes, I have links to them on all the websites. And
Okay.
I'm going to bring up something real quick.
And please reach out to me. You can reach out to Danny, I know, and he's on LinkedIn, Danny Kuhn. And please follow him and connect with him, and especially if you're part of the Blue Line family here. Man, we're there for each other. We have our backs on and off duty, current or retired. We are there, and we are a brother and sisterhood that's going to continue on, just like we are in Christ. We're all God's children, and we are together. So reach out to other people and don't feel it's a weakness. So there were times, Jesus knelt and wept. He wept, and because he was in human form, God in human form, and he felt the same emotions that we feel, right, Danny?
That's right. If you are a law enforcement officer, corrections officer, if you are a retired law enforcement officer, including correction officer, dispatchers, mainly our 911 dispatchers, never get the respect that they are. They are the first person you call when you need help.
That's right.
And they are the ones at the end of the line that are deciphering us yelling into a microphone when we need help.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they are really our angels. My God, there are angels out there. I kind of, man. Hey, Danny. So, did you have a final thought there, or I see you looking?
Yeah. If I was looking for the actual number. If you need help,
Yeah, if you have a
you're
number, please. I'm going to
retired,
put
if
it up
you
on
are
the screen too
family-
when I edit this.
if you are a family member of a law enforcement officer, if you need help, there are two very good organizations that you can call. Both of them are manned by retired, specially trained law enforcement officers or police officers. The first one is Copline. Copline is international, and their United States phone number is 1-800-COPLINE or 1-800-267-5463. And the other one, it's also, it started off just as a New Jersey base, but now they are also national, and I believe they're international also. They are Cop to Cop, and their phone number is 866-267-2267. And both of those, it's totally confidential. You can talk about what's bothering you, whatever issues you want, with a specially trained retired police officer. there's also two organizations that offer help for first responders and law enforcement officers. One of them, and veterans. One of them is a Mighty Oaks Foundation, which we've talked about. Mighty Oaks is an international organization, and they do week-long deprogramming, I'll call it, sessions throughout the United States. They have 5 or 6 different camps strategically placed in the United States where they have these training sessions. And another one is Reboot Recovery. Now, Reboot Recovery is huge on the East Coast and in the South. They do these 13 or 14 week training sessions where it's once a week, and you go in and you learn about post-traumatic stress and deprogramming. Both of these organizations are faith-based.
Yes.
So you don't have to be a Christian to go. You don't have to be a Christian when you leave. But they are faith-based, and they put in how God will heal you, how God will give you the right resources to heal you. And that is most important. In the very beginning of this podcast, I mentioned that my wife was diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer. Her lung, she had half of her lung removed. She had a tumor the size of a softball removed from her lung. She had part of her diaphragm removed. Sadly, that cancer metastasized to her brain, and she had a tumor the size of an almond or a peach pit removed from her brain. Throughout that whole ordeal, God gave us an abundance of help. We had a Jewish neurosurgeon. Her surgeon was probably Catholic. Her oncologist was Jewish. One of her surgical teams were Muslim from throughout different religions and different faiths. She had someone from just about each one of them on her surgery team. So it wasn't all Christian. The dude that did her brain surgery, that's an awesome doctor. Now, he is a professed Christian, and he's the one that actually had the steady hands to do the brain surgery. But my wife, after 6 years or 4 years after brain surgery, she's walking and talking, and there's a lot of things that she can't do, but she is active and she's out doing things. So that's just a blessing from God. So
thank God. I was hesitant to ask what the prognosis, what happened. So I'm so heartfelt that she's still here and she's still with us.
She's here.
Thank God.
Her oncologist now has deemed her cancer-free, which is a blessing. You still have the effects of chemotherapy. You have the effects of radiation. You have,
of course,
brain surgery is no joke. And
no.
You have a little bit of that. So, but it is just awesome. And that is what our God will do when you ask him for help.
Yep. I have one of my best friends from upstate New York. Originally, he has now started a chaplaincy for the Rochester, New York Police Department, the Monroe County Sheriff's Department. And in the midst of having been involved in creating those chaplaincies, 2 years in, his heart failed and he had to have a heart transplant. And, 3 months ago, he was wheeled down the hallway, not knowing if he was going to be there the next morning. And a lot of things came together, and he has had a successful heart transplant. He is back preaching the gospel to the Rochester Police Department, Monroe County Sheriffs. He's in Florida now on an investigator's seminar, and he's doing the Lord's work. And he had to maintain some great faith during that time. But like you said, people come together and really... they're not coincidental ways, my friend. So thank you for that message.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You got it.
Please come back again. I took more than an hour of your time. I love you, my brother. And, originally I had a podcast and you had reached out to me and kind of said, hey, there's a lot of these other sources you weren't aware of that you probably should point a light to. And then I said, well, please come on the show and we'll talk about those things. I only left them out in ignorance. And so I'm glad that we can shed a light and we don't put any covering over the light that we can put out in the world. So, Danny, thank you so much. Will you come back, my brother?
I will come back, Leftis. I enjoy getting two things. I enjoy getting the word out, for one.
Yes.
And I also enjoy educating others on post-traumatic stress and suicidal ideation.
Yes.
And I hope the next time we talk, maybe we could do on cardiovascular health and sleep deprivation. I've got a couple of really good books. I've been reading about that. I've been studying on it big time. Dave Grossman has some great philosophy on it.
So
it's just a wonderful way to go. And
Can we get together on that? Because I actually went through a Primal Health Coaching Institute created by Mark Sisson, a man in his 70s, and I've made the change now because I went vegan for a while, and then all my numbers were great, Danny, except guess what? My sugar, my glucose. And so now I've actually switched to nutrient-dense foods, and I've gotten away from sugars, grains, and chemically altered oils. I'm eating healthy fats and proteins, and I can't tell you the energy that I have. And now my numbers a little higher in the lipoproteins and the cholesterol. However, my triglycerides are down to 60, and that's those. So I've been studying cardiovascular disease, the number one killer of mankind for so long, and so I want to get together and talk with you about that. As a matter of fact, I've been trying to figure out who my audience is going to be in coaching. So I think it's going to be people that are suffering from being unable to moderate their glucose and insulin levels.
Yeah, insulin resistance, diabetics, people having a hard time sleeping, and why cops get fat. That is directly
related to lack of sleep and cortisol.
Diet.
Yeah. And so let's get into that. I'm glad you're interested in that because that's something I've been into for the past year. So, Danny,
the last couple of months I've been doing a low carb, right around between 40 and 60 carbs a day diet, where I've cut out all non-processed carbs. Basically, the old saying, the whiter the bread, the quicker you're dead. Yeah, I've cut all of that stuff out.
Me too, Danny. Me too. I'm so glad you did that because you know what? You can your body will actually learn how to burn fat and ketones as fuel, and all carbohydrates, no matter what, get converted to glucose, and the body has to dump insulin in to control that. Hey, please hang around for a debrief. This is Danny Kuhn, everybody, and you know where all the links are going to be in the show notes of the podcast platforms and on the YouTube description. All right, Danny, hang around a little bit here, buddy.
You got it, Cliff.